Welcome to Morning Coffee with Kyle, that show where I drink my morning coffee and I do it with a friend and colleague, and we just talk about ministry. And this morning, I have as my guest the Reverend Paul Sink, who is the pastor of Taylorsville Presbyterian. He's been a friend of mine for the last 13 years now. We've been in the presbytery together a long time. And Paul is also serving as the moderator of our presbytery, Salem Presbytery. And that's what we're going to talk about for a little bit together today. But Paul, what else is there to say about you? Any other word of introduction?
It's good to be with you, Kyle. I'm wondering where my coffee is, though. You have a cup there in front of you, but I missed that somehow.
I wasn't supposed to provide the morning coffee. Oh, well.
Okay.
Well, it can just be a virtual cup of coffee, Paul.
Okay.
You're drinking coffee with me in spirit, right?
No, you gave a fine introduction, and I have been in Taylorsville. This is my 14th year in ministry here, and was in Statesville prior to that at First Pres there as the associate for youth. So I've been in the area for going on 20 years, and that's my tenure in Salem Presbytery as well, because that was my first call to Statesville right out of seminary. So. But no, I have felt right at home in this neighborhood.
Good. Well, it's been a good presbytery to serve in for a long while, and Paul was just about 20 minutes up the highway from where I spent 10 years as the pastor of Concord Presbyterian. So we've been neighboring colleagues for a long time. But just this past year, our presbytery has elected Paul to be the moderator of the presbytery. That is an elected volunteer position, it turned out. I didn't know if you thought maybe you were going to get paid, but that's not how that works. And Paul is new to this position, although he's been busy in this position for the last few months, really since the start of this year. And I wonder, Paul, if you have any more to offer those who may be watching who don't necessarily know what a moderator of a presbytery is, though I know that's something you're learning as you go as well.
Well, it is something. It's definitely a learning on the job type of a training. I did attend training back in November in Louisville over a 2-day period to learn how to use the gavel and run a presbytery meeting, and that's really where a lot of what people see of the moderator is literally the moderating of the presbytery meetings. So think of your own church sessions, and whether it's the pastor or the clerk who runs the meeting, keeps you on task and moves you through the agenda. That's my job. But beyond that, I have recently learned, as many of you know, we're in the process of selling the presbytery office building, and I have learned that it is also my job that I am the top officer of the presbytery. So when it comes time to sign the deed, I'm the legal signature for 2 years for the presbytery in those type of matters. And that was new to me. So like I say, it's on the job learning. And it's kind of funny that I've been the moderator since February, the meeting that we had at Clemens Presbyterian Church. And I have yet to actually moderate a meeting because of COVID. Our May meeting was canceled altogether. Our upcoming August meeting is going to be on Zoom. So that's going to be a completely foreign process to me as moderator. I've fortunately moderated a couple of my own session meetings on Zoom, but that's about the extent of my Zoom moderating experience. So I will be praying for lots of grace and leniency on people's parts as we muddle through that together. But so that's as far as I understand my job to this point, that's what I've learned.
Yeah, and Paul also has a seat on the executive council. I'm a ex officio member of that as well. So we've been seeing each other on those Zoom calls as they've been happening. And as it turns out, it's not just the gavel, I guess, but there's there's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes on between meetings. Our presbytery has a lot of things to tend to. And as Paul said, we are in this time of transition. It's been a little while now, but we voted on a new plan from the Dream Team that really re-envisioned and reimagined what our presbytery might look like and what it might be. And we voted on that plan February a year ago, I suppose, though it had been in the works for a long time before that. And it's really been a radical restructuring of what we're about. As Paul mentioned, we're in the middle of selling the office there and moving to a virtual office model. All of us have had to move to a virtual model in recent months, but that was already the plan for the presbytery. And in addition to that, we have let go of some fine staff members and made the transition to a different idea and looking for folks who might do slightly different jobs than what those dear folks were doing. And we're just in the middle of the shuffle, and it's made for a lot of extra thinking and just a whole host of challenges, not just related to this COVID quarantine thing, but really being in this liminal transitional space in terms of how we're doing things. And I wonder what thoughts you might have kind of from this perch you're on as moderator, how that's going and what's good about it, maybe what's going to be challenging about it. Just sort of looking for your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, I certainly wouldn't call it a perch. I think I'm down in the weeds at this point. But because of just the nature of the transition, and with all the complicating factors of COVID and of our reduced staff that we're currently operating under with the presbytery, there's just been a lot of moving parts and a lot of balls to try and keep in the air, and those have not mostly landed with me, but I've tried to be as supportive of the staff as possible. So to that end, myself and the chair of our executive council, Jeff Sockwell, he and I have been meeting weekly with the staff at their staff meetings to just help think through all of the things that are coming, especially related to the move out of the presbytery building and that sort of thing. So I've been a lot more engaged at the staff level than I might have envisioned otherwise. And not that I lament that at all, because I enjoy our presbytery staff. They're a fantastic group of folks. And so it really is a pleasure to be able to be with them, even though it's an added burden on the schedule. They're good people, and we're glad to be able to honor their work with us, and it's good work. The changes that are on the horizon, some of it, well, actually most of it is still a fairly large question mark, even though we have the Dream Team's plan that the presbytery has adopted. If you'll recall, back in February at our meeting, we had unearthed a pretty large financial kerfuffle in terms of per capita payments, back payments, and current payments that had not been being made, to the tune of a very large chunk of money over a 10 or so year period, almost $1 million. And that highlighted the fact that we are not on as stable platform financially as a presbytery as we need to be, and therefore it raises questions of how do we pay for what we're planning to do. And so I think it was Steve Scott, our general presbyter, or transitional general presbyter, had said at the last presbytery meeting, we kind of need to put things on pause with that until we can figure out what it is we really need to be doing. And to that end, the transition team, or the implementation team, and our personnel committee have been working together to retool a new job description for a transitional presbyter, and that's been approved by council. The search is ongoing. And so once we have that person in place, there'll still be a time of transition of trying to work with a new transitional presbyter to help us massage the dream team's plan in a way that will fit our financial reality. I see that there will be some shifts that need to take place either on the plan side or on the financial side or both. And a lot of that's going to depend on how this new presbyter is able to help the council kind of revision, working along with the implementation team to see where we end up. But I think it's going to be a time of evaluating where we stand. So I don't know that I can really say this is where we're headed, just because of the big question mark that the finances raise at this point.
Yeah, and all of that came before our COVID reality, which just and even the market reality that puts everything up in the air. We've all been learning to live in this total space of uncertainty, and in my context, I'm sure in yours, we are wrestling with realities that seem like they change every week, and adaptive leadership has been something that we've all been forced into, kicking and screaming, like it or not. We have to be on our toes, so to speak, all the time to be handling this at the level of church. And I think that in some ways, the level of our wider denomination, our presbytery, it's just like that too. We have to be on our toes. And there is a lot of work that our presbytery does. Sometimes people wonder, what is this presbytery thing for? Is it just church bureaucracy? And it is that, but it's also the way that we make sure churches have clergy. That's something that we help do. We help provide for that. We make sure that those ministers are good fits with churches. And in the past, we have provided programs and resources for churches, and that's going to change in the way that it happens, but not the fundamental reality of it. We still want to be resourcing the churches of our presbytery and finding ways to connect them and bring them.
Our committee on ministry has been probably more active over the last year in terms of the committee members themselves, because the staffing support changed. And so, those folks have worked their hearts out to keep the ministerial staffing of our congregations, to stay on top of that. That is a large job. And it does highlight for our congregations just the whole season that we find ourselves in with the financial challenge, the huge financial challenge. It points out that we've not done a great job either as from a presbytery side or from the church side of communicating our needs financially over recent years. And I think that that's something that we all have to work together on. We've got to find ways to be perfectly transparent, even when we thought we were being. We obviously weren't being enough. And from the church side, we've got to find ways to reconnect ourselves and to remember that we are a connectional church, and that the presbytery is not just a staff that's working for us, but the presbytery is us. I mean, we all serve on these committees of the presbytery because we are the presbytery. And so when we remember that, I think it becomes easier for our churches to support the cooperative ministry of presbytery, both from the standpoint of people serving on committees and on the financial side, because both of those pieces have been sliding in recent years, as we found. The financial piece is obvious on paper. The people serving committees is very obvious to the nominating committee.
That's right. I'm on the nominating committee, and I have laughed about this for a long time, and I guess I'll out it here. But I was asked to serve on the nominating committee for my first term, and I just sort of got angry at the person who called and asked me and said, why is it that the same people are asked over and over again to do everything? Do you know how many things I'm on right now? And why are we always tapping the same people on the shoulder? And that dear soul who called me said, well, Kyle, that's exactly why we need you on the nominating committee. That's how I was convinced to serve on that particular body, is being tapped on the shoulder. But it's been good work. It's just challenging. I'm in the market for people in my congregation to serve. We've had one person serving faithfully for a long time and is just stepped away, but he was on the executive council too, Graham Dale. Graham was very faithful in personnel, and of course he's well skilled in that area. But those church members who are watching this, and really anyone who's watching this in our congregations, I would, as a nominating committee member and as just a member of our presbytery, say there are opportunities to serve in the wider denomination. And they are rich and they're rewarding. Lately, they've been tall orders, I guess. But our ability to serve and in 10 congregations is just something that is sorely needed. And we all have good people. And I know we're tapping our good people on the shoulder to work in the church too. But I have found, at least, that the experience of getting to know what other churches are doing and what challenges they face, and really the successes as well, is a great thing to bring back to our own congregation. Just knowing what others are doing and having that sense of the wider body of Christ can be a real opportunity to be creative in our own church, and just to bring those ideas and let them stir in the mix. That's been important for us for a long time. And
I take every opportunity I can to share stories from what people are doing around the presbytery here in our own congregation, either through sermon illustrations or just general conversation. But yeah, you're right, it does stir and fester to bring people to the realization that, oh yeah, maybe I can do something to benefit the presbytery as a whole.
Well, speaking of ways that we serve, I wanted to be sure to talk about for a minute another aspect of your service as moderator is that you attended the General Assembly of the Presbyterian Church USA, that highest governing body of our denomination. And just like we were talking about with the upcoming August Presbytery meeting, for the first time, that General Assembly was held virtually. And I would love for you to tell everyone a little bit about what it was like to be a part of a gathering that was quite large. I mean, hundreds of people participating on something, I guess it was a Zoom call or something like it, right? How that many people come together and in our Presbyterian fashion, decently and in order, try to do business from screens like the one you and I are looking at right now.
Well, I'll say that it was one of the longest meetings I've ever attended, just because if anyone else who's watching this has been on a Zoom call, you know that Zoom time is multiplied in terms of how it feels. So the 20, I don't know how many hours that we spent together, probably bumping on 30 hours total for the assembly, felt a whole lot longer than that. But the meeting itself was really interesting. I mean, it was on a Zoom call. There were always somewhere between 750 and 800 people on the call at a time. So it was pretty fascinating. You could scroll through all the different screens of people. There were about 30 on a screen at a time, and see people all over the country, all over the world for that matter. And so that was really interesting. And it gave you more of a face-to-face look at who our commissioners were than you would have had even with the in-person assembly, because when you're in the assembly hall, I would assume, I've never been to a big general assembly, but you're facing the stage, and there's people in front of you you're looking at the back of their heads, and there's people behind you that they're looking at the back of your head. And so we were all face to face ish. So the worship experience was really powerful. Knowing that it was something that had never been done in, as far as we know, any of our mainline denominations. We were the first to do a national church meeting in this fashion. And so, just knowing that on top of the gravity of worshiping with the entire representative denomination was powerful. The format was pretty limiting, though. Again, I don't have anything to compare it to because I've never been a commissioner for assembly before, but the online format meant that our docket was incredibly short, even though it felt really long for what we were doing. But there were, I didn't count the number, tens and tens and tens of items that were pushed to the next assembly in hopes that it would be in person 2 years from now, because so much of the assembly's work every time it meets is done in committees, as we know from our local churches. Committees are generally the grunt work. They're the workhorses of our congregations, and it's the same with our denomination. And so because of the Zoom format, committee structures and conversations just were not possible. And so what that meant was that anything that required conversation or debate had to be hashed out on the plenary floor. Whereas so much of the critical issues, social justice concerns that are facing the church and our world right now would have had rich and fruitful conversations in committees. When you try to have a rich and fruitful conversation on the plenary floor of the General Assembly, for the most part, it's really tough because of the limiting format of Robert's Rules of Order. We were, any meaningful conversation was hamstrung by Robert. He had his finger in every moment of the assembly in that regard. And so it really, we got a lot of good work done, but it limited us, especially when it came to social justice things, that where wording of this or wording of that didn't quite do what we as a denomination would like for it to do or need for it to do in terms of a statement piece, and supporting minority groups and whatnot. To try to figure out all those nuances within the structure of formal motions and amendments to motions and all of that, it was really onerous. And we ended up with a lot of hurt feelings because of that. If you have read any of the reviews coming out of General Assembly, most of them will say something to the effect of how much our denomination's white supremacy reigned over that assembly. And most of what that came down to, in my opinion, is how Robert's Rules of Order constrained any constructive conversation. And it was really painful, particularly for Black women and girls who there were concerns raised for in terms of including them specifically as a group in a couple of places, in a couple of pieces of action that we took. And the adding of that should have been something simple, you would think, I would think. But because of the constraints of the format, it was far from simple, and it didn't happen. Concerns around Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. There were numerous items that were raised that didn't get the time for conversation because of the plenary format that they really and truly deserved. And so it was painful. It was really frustrating, because I recognized how important those are. Our denomination is primarily white. You know, we have to own that. We have to figure out how to lift up other voices so that they are truly heard, understood, and respected. And I don't think we did that well. I know we didn't do that well at the assembly. And so, you know, we come away from it with a bit of a downer kind of a feeling. Now, we had a great moment when we elected our new co-moderators. Wow, that was powerful. That was I was not expecting to have a moment where I became emotional sitting in front of a computer on a Zoom meeting. But when ruling elder Ilona Street Stewart and Reverend Gregory Bentley were installed, she being Native American heritage and him being African American heritage, it was powerful and truly a glorious moment for our denomination.
Wow.
You know, wow.
Two things you said kind of at different times I want to lift up. They're sitting with me, and one is how important face-to-face is. And I love what you said about the ability to actually see people's faces. This is something that we're really struggling with, I think, right now in the church, is not being able to see one another face to face, and the grief that causes and the struggle. But I also think, and I see it causing some harm in the same way that you've been talking about, in the idea that when we're not face to face, when we can't look each other in the eye, when we can't see each other as human beings because of this separation, it lends itself to treating one another in ways that are not becoming of the body of Christ, or not even that, just not how we are. You know, it's not who we are. And I think there are so many times where we have been where we've been at our best in the midst of these months and have really come through for one another. And then there are other times because we can't look each other in the eye, where we have been maybe our worst selves. And I am so aware of that. And I think the General Assembly and its work are a great way of talking about that in macrocosm, right? And we are hurtful and harmful to one another. We would dare say things over a chat, or however it was communicated, a virtual cue and an opportunity to speak, that maybe we wouldn't say if we were looking, you know, at the people around us and not at ourselves on the screen, because I know every single one of those people who spoke, just because this is how we are, you know, we're looking at themselves, and yet the opportunity is there through media like this to really connect face to face. One of the things I have loved about doing these morning coffees with Kyle is that, you know, you're right, Zoom meetings feel very tedious and they feel like they're longer, but I haven't sensed that in just talking one-on-one with people, right? I've been longing for it, and it flies by. I mean, we've been at this for about 40 minutes now, I think, and it flies by because it's just an opportunity to really do face-to-face in a way that we've been missing. You know, I've seen you on Zoom call meetings. We've talked, we've texted, but spending some time with you face-to-face is so much better. than that. And those opportunities have been there. And talking about our denomination being connectional, that shouldn't be about bureaucracy. It shouldn't be about that interreliance and burden. What it should be about is recognizing that there are others in other churches who are doing the same kind of ministry that we do, and that we belong to one another, and we can create personal relationships that are meaningful just outside of our own congregation. That's something that I'm learning about a lot as we do these kinds of virtual conversations.
And that's a piece that we really missed as the commissioners from Salem Presbytery too, was the relationship piece.
Right.
We had a text chat group going through the entire assembly, but banter by text is far from being able to lean over and nudge somebody or write somebody a note when you're sitting at a table in a big assembly hall, and enjoy a meal together between plenary sessions and things like that. So we, as commissioners, I feel like we got shorted. We missed out on that, and that's a completely selfish thing to say, but I'm saying it on behalf of our group, and we really missed out on that. And so that was a piece that was tough to swallow as well. We did have a great group of commissioners, which included young adult advisory delegate, and Nolan was engaged in the meeting through the entire time, and there again, that's another place where we as a denomination at the assembly level, we let them down. Our YADs is what they're called, young adult advisory delegates. Our YADs brought a motion to be considered at the end of the meeting. And in order for new business to come to this assembly, for each possible item of new business, we had to vote to suspend our rules. So here again, it's Robert's rules constricting us. We had to vote to suspend the rules because the rules said no new business could be brought. And our YADs, it was the only action that they sought to bring to the entire assembly, other than they were, of course, advising us on every single vote, which was wonderful. But they were shut down by vote of the assembly. Their request to change the rules to bring their motion was denied. We're not listening to young people. We're not listening to people of color. And that has to change in the PCUSA.
Well, Paul, I cannot imagine a note better to end on than that. So we won't go looking for it. Thank you for coming on and spending some time with me. Thank you for your leadership. I don't know how many people are saying that to you, but I am watching. I have a little bit of a behind the scenes look. I know how much you are doing to support our presbytery right now, and am just supremely thankful for it. And as we continue to make our way together, it's important that we have those people in place who are kind of being the glue to help us hold together and see us through it. And I know you're doing that. So thank you so much.
Thanks for coffee time with Kyle.
All right, Paul. You take care. Thanks. Bye.